with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, monimulu wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is James Breakwell. He is here to celebrate You Can't Be a Pterodactyl. Before we invite James into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Rex's Journey, helping children understand and cope with emotions. Rex has been struggling with understanding why and how he feels. From angry one minute to sad the next, he just wants to be a kid. What's so hard about that? You know, we can't always control how we feel, especially not as kids. Follow along with Rex's journey as he learns to cope with his emotions in a safe and healthy way. This is something we can all learn from. Rex's journey was written by Dr. Ambrose Pass Turner, a doctor of counseling psychology, and she's also the owner of APT Counseling Services. She has many decades of experience helping kids and adults and families learn to deal with their emotions in healthy ways. This is a wonderful resource for any classroom, any family library. Rex's Journey by Dr. Ambrose Pass Turner. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Since the Baby Came, a siblings learning to love story in 16 poems written by Kathleen Long Bostrom. This charming, playful story in verse introduces children to a variety of different poetic forms while walking them through all the twists and turns of welcoming a new baby into the family. Mama is having a baby. Everything's starting to change. God, can you tell me what happened? Life is becoming so strange. Since the Baby Came offers a unique take on a timeless topic. This heartfelt and humorous drama unfolds completely in verse, addressing the full range of emotions a young child experiences when a new baby joins the family. From surprise and confusion to feelings of neglect and jealousy to wholehearted tenderness and affection. This book also introduces young children to the playfulness and fun of various forms of poetry. You're going to love this book. It's Since the Baby Came, a siblings learning to love story in 16 poems written by Kathleen Long Bostrom. Join us right now from the great state of Indiana. Our guest is here today to celebrate a really fun book. It's called You Can't Be a Pterodactyl. Please welcome to the show, James Breakwell. Hey, James, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on, but I have to tell you up front, I'm not excited to try to spell pterodactyl correctly in the show notes.
You know, that's been the bane of my existence as we're getting ready to promote this book and sending emails back and forth. I have to check myself every time. It's like, oh no, I should have picked an easier to spell dinosaur.
So have you gotten any emails back with the pterodactyls not spelled with a P?
Yeah, I haven't. You know, one of the plot points too, I guess I just said I should have picked another dinosaur. Pterodactyls actually aren't dinosaurs. They're prehistoric reptiles. So I just destroyed my own pterodactyl credibility 30 seconds into this interview. So there's no place to go but down from here.
Wait a minute. My mind is being blown here. Now, I grew up thinking that dinosaurs were reptiles and lizards, and now I'm told that the T-Rex is a chicken, and you're telling me that the dinosaur that flies in the air isn't a bird, it's not a dinosaur, it's a reptile. What's wrong with me?
what's wrong with the world? What's wrong with biology? I don't think the problem is us here. I think the problem is the pterodactyl itself. It could have made life easier and just been a dinosaur, but no, it had to be on a different branch of the animal kingdom. I just have to put it in the proper spot, or else my 9-year-old is going to come down here and scold me, because I know she knows all these dinosaur facts. So it's my responsibility to keep them straight, lest I get in big trouble with her.
All right, so now that we got the spelling straight and we have the, what is it, etymology? Well, we put
well, etymology is word origin. I don't know what the term is for biology,
well,
biological origin.
We put it in the right category.
Yeah.
Tell us about the book.
It's my first children's book, and it's about a little boy who, when the teacher goes around and asks everybody what they want to be when they grow up, he says he wants to be a pterodactyl, and he is fixated on this idea. And everybody in his life gives him a hard time about it, except for his dad. And his dad says, well, that's a pretty cool idea. What is it that you like about being a pterodactyl? And when they really drill down to the qualities that he likes about being a pterodactyl, they realize that's pretty doable. And so it ends with, I guess I don't know how promoting children's books works. I don't know if I was just to spoil the ending or not, but there's a happy ending. He finds a compromise to live a pterodactyl-ish life.
There you go.
Yeah. And I think it's a good message for kids. Everybody, they sometimes have some crazy dreams, and it's like, well, maybe you can't be a fire truck when you grow up, but what about being a fire truck appeals to you? Maybe we can find something that's halfway there. It's in that spirit.
Well, in all seriousness, first off, I don't think a podcast that is aimed at adults, I don't think you're going to hurt sales by giving them a spoiler.
It's like, I don't have to buy the book now. I know the big twist at the end.
Forget about my kid. I don't care if my kid likes the book. But I think, that's really a cool response to a kid, as opposed to like, no, that's ridiculous. What's wrong with you? It's like, well, that's really interesting. That's really cool. Let's talk about it, because I think anything that encourages conversation between adults and kids, parents and kids, is wonderful. And it can't hurt. It can only good things can come of it, I think.
I think so too. And that's something I have to work on as a parent constantly. My kids go off on some tangent for something that is just, so far beyond me and internet pop culture or whatever else. And it's like, well, let's boil down here. This is important to them. Let's figure out why it's important to them and figure out how I can make it important to me too. It's kind of spanning that generational gap. I don't know if you've experienced this in your own life or not. I remember growing up where, I'd be into this or that, and my parents were so confused, and I thought they were so behind the times. And now that's me. Like, my kids are doing all these things I've never heard of. They're into these celebrities I didn't know existed, and it just, I have to kind of stay on my toes to keep track of what they're interested in, what they like, what their dreams are, and kind of, keep supporting them in that way.
Well, James, to let you know where I am in my life's journey, the way I used to dress for high school is now a Halloween costume. So talk about cultural appropriation. But I do understand that. And I certainly was not perfect. I've certainly shared here on the podcast many times when I didn't appreciate the fact that my kid who loved anime and graphic novels, I didn't realize at that time that graphic novels and reading graphic novels was reading, and that there was great literature that we found in the pages of graphic novels. And very oftentimes I would walk into his room when he was in high school and say, please, can you just read a book without pictures once? But no, he didn't. But I did support, and we did give him lots of graphic novels and supported that reading. We can't be perfect. There are going to be days when our kids come up to us and go, why can't I be a sponge right now? And ideally we'd be like, well, you could be like a sponge if you listen to everything I say and absorb it. But no, we're busy, and sometimes we fly off the handle, or, don't have enough time to do that.
Yeah, it's, I'd like to say we have infinite time and infinite patience and all of those things, but the truth is we are very flawed human beings. And if I keep my kids alive through the day, sometimes that's enough. And if I get to the end of the day and they're still alive, then we go for bonus points, and we go for really engaging those dreams. So it's just kind of round two.
Yeah. What is it about the pterodactyl that there's lots of dinosaurs. It could have been a stegosaurus, which was my favorite, or brontosaurus, or T-Rex, or what was it about the pterodactyl that inspired you to include it in the story?
I think it's just it's so ridiculous and outlandish. I think anybody could want to be a T-Rex or anybody could want to be a Triceratops. But I want to be a pterodactyl. That's a very specific set of like dinosaur powers, non-dinosaur. I'm sorry, a very specific set of prehistoric reptile powers. You know, kind of soaring in the air and going down and scooping up fish and living in an isolated cave over the ocean. I mean, those aren't things that a typical kid is going to want to do, and that really appealed to me. It's also, pterodactyls kind of become a symbol of my own children. Through some inside jokes we've developed, I kind of call them the squaldron. It's that screeching, squalling kind of pterodactyl noise. It's a sound that's heard a lot in my house. And so rather than a squadron of children, we say we have a squaldron of children. I actually made temporary tattoos with a pterodactyl on it. Especially the younger ones, the ones who like dinosaurs, they're very proud of the moniker. So we kind of have fun with that. And a pterodactyl screech is still an impressive and terrifying thing to hear. You know, it's you hear the roar of a T-Rex on Jurassic Park, and it's the combination of like a lion and a bunch of other things. But a pterodactyl screech, man, that cuts you through to your soul. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of sound my kids make. So when I went for something ancient that this kid could want to be, a pterodactyl was really the only choice.
You mentioned that this is your first children's books. You've written books for adults. What was it like? What was that experience changing up and writing for kids? How did that work for you?
It was magnificent. So I am currently knee deep in the sequel to my first sci-fi book. So I have a sci-fi book out called The Chosen 12. I think it's 90,000 words. The sequel has to be at least 80,000 words. I am currently in college. I pulled all-nighters to get papers done. To get this book done, the sequel to The Chosen 12, I'm pulling an all-monther. It's rough. Every waking hour that I'm not someplace else, I'm just putting into this book. As opposed to that, writing a children's book, this thing was 700 words. I think I wrote it I did 2 passes. I think total it was probably 2 hours. And I can't say that was all typing. It was just magical. It's like a poem. It's just this fun idea, and you throw it out in the world, and then you pass it off to an illustrator and say, okay, now go do the real work. And Sophie Corrigan took over, and she was really kind of magical with the way she made this appear on the page. She gave it life. She gave it its whole spirit, its whole vibe. And, her part, I spent 2 hours writing these words with this neat idea based on my experiences with my kids. And then she spent many months poring over it and, illustrating it. And then it came together. And it's really interesting because when I wrote it, right, the words, they're kind of vague and you can kind of interpret them any way you want. When you're an illustrator, like, you have to pick an interpretation. That's got to be one way. And that really came to be an issue for the final pages, because originally how I had worded it, it was super vague and it wasn't entirely clear if this little kid literally became a pterodactyl or not. I was like, well, he could have. That could be one interpretation. And Nancy Paulson's like, well, we can't have every interpretation. There's got to be one. Something has to happen to it. So he is not a pterodactyl at the end of the book. He has a very pterodactyl lifestyle, but there's also a closing picture where he literally is a pterodactyl with his dad. So you can choose whichever version you want, the imaginary version or the literal version. I think both are perfectly acceptable.
I'm curious, what does a pterodactyl lifestyle look like before you get to college? I mean, I can kind of imagine what it's like in college, but I don't know pre-college. What's that like?
So the way we interpret it for the end of this story, he wanted to be a pterodactyl so he could be above all life's problems, but he could still come down and help people when he wanted to. He could be alone, but he could be there and he could be helpful. So at the end of the book, he's a rescue pilot with a seaplane. So he literally soars above the ocean, but he swoops down and helps people. And he's in the habitat he wanted, and he sees these exotic jungle locations like he would have as a pterodactyl. So that was the compromise. As far as what that looks like before you become a pilot, I'm not entirely sure. I guess you could enjoy lots of fish and make lots of screeching noises. My kids have got the screeching part down. They're not such big fans of fish, but I think you can make it work.
Now, one of the things I've heard from authors who begin their career writing for adults and then switch over to writing for kids and writing picture books, they say that it's very difficult when you're able to tell a story with 90,000 words. It's very difficult to then be able to tell the story with only 700 words. It sounds like that was something that was that came naturally to you. This
story came out so easily. And it totally ruined me because I thought, well, children's books are easy. I'm going to do this all the time. And I haven't gotten one to work since. I've had like 9 other children's books, but maybe not quite 9, but there have been quite a few I've tried to pitch. And they haven't come together like this one. And this one, it was, in the first draft was very different, but it was the same idea. It's like, here's a kid with an impossible, ridiculous dream. You know, what's going to happen? And then at first I kind of had the antagonist being his parent. And then I switched around. I was like, that's terrible. Like, if there's one person who should believe an impossible dream, it should be the parent. So I switched it around, and I had everybody in the world doubting this kid except for the parent. And it worked. I mean, by that second pass was like, oh my gosh, this is a great story. But after that, it is incredibly hard. I think actual children's books authors are, it is a skill, it is a talent, and I admire them greatly for it. I have stuck a toe in your world, and I feel like I've had that toe bitten off by a shark now, so I will respect your craft.
Well, you know, you mentioned you basically changed the perspective of your book. Mm-hmm. And that's something, one of the titans of children's literature, Jerry Spinelli, said that his whole career changed when he changed the perspective of one of the stories that he was writing. And it changed his life, it changed his career. So I think that's really great advice that for anybody who's out there who's currently aspiring to be a children's author or is stuck on a current project. Maybe we'll work with your sequel, and maybe the last 20,000 words will come easier if you change your perspective.
Oh man, if only it were that easy. You write enough things. It is the best feeling in the world where when you're struggling with something and things just suddenly click together at the end and everything works. And that's why it was so fun with this book when it just worked. But man, when you only have 700 words to play with and it doesn't work, that is a devastating feeling too. I am delighted that this one came together and it's going to see the light of day just for that. And I'm looking forward to it the most because I write so many things. So I've written my first several books were comedy books for parents about children. They're like parenting guides. And I wrote the sci-fi book. I wrote one guided journal for kids. But then this is really the first like short, narrative work for children. And I just feel like it's something people are actually going to read. It's like, yeah, we like you. We like your tweets. But I'm not going to read 90,000 words. Like, will you read 700? Will you look at some pretty pictures? I feel like this is the first time that a lot of people are actually going to read anything I've written beyond a tweet. So I'm looking forward to that.
You mentioned that you're writing parenting books, and you certainly have some expertise, some experience that can give you credibility. I think you told me you have 7 kids?
No, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I myself only have 4. I learned a slight lesson from my parents. I was like, let's dial it back. We don't need 7. 4 is perfectly fine. I have 4 daughters. They are 13, 11, 9, and 7. So we were spaced out every 2 years. Just got my first teenager. She just staged up from 12 to 13 the other day. So that's a whole new adventure. But yeah, I do still have kids in the age range to read this book, which will be nice too, because my kids see me writing things and they don't read anything I write. I offer it to them. Like, you can read this. Go ahead. They're like, yeah, no, I'm going to go watch YouTube. So we'll see. We'll see if maybe I can get a couple of them to stick with me for 25 pages of a picture book. I'm
sure people are going to be out there asking themselves, how in the world does he find time to write 700 words? Forget about 90,000 words with 4 kids.
I have learned a very harsh lesson with this latest sequel I'm writing. Not with this children's book, which was delightful and very quick to write, but with writing in general. You really cannot have it all. And when I was very happy that my first sci-fi book succeeded, I was very happy to get to a sequel. At the same time, by the time I got to the point that like I locked in that contract, I looked at myself like, do I really have time for this? And the answer was no. Like, you can't, there are not enough hours in the day to make this work. And, online, there's a big culture of fake it till you make it. But I have a day job. I do. I have a day job, and I have 4 kids who have sports and activities and Boy Scouts and all these other things they have to get to. And then on top of that, I have my Twitter stuff, and I write 2 newsletters a week, which is the bulk of my writing income right there. And those are, that's 100,000 words a year right there. And And then on top of that, I had this sequel. And I was like, well, I'll make it work somehow. And how I made it work was in the final month of panic, I had to strategically cut out everything else in my life. So outside of this wonderful conversation I'm having right now with you, pretty much all my other waking hours are going to be devoted to that sequel. And then the second that sequel is done, which should be by June 30th, everything is going into this children's book and making sure as many people as possible hear about it. So hopefully they can enjoy that pterodactyl goodness too.
So now that you've written the book and you're getting ready to start sharing it after that sequel is finished being written, have you caught the kids' book bug? Are you planning on writing more picture books?
I have written some drafts of them. Nothing else has been picked up yet. So this last year, when I probably should have been working on that sequel, I did write some children's books. They're fun. I got Sophie to illustrate some sample drawings for them, and I'd love to make it work again. It's just such a different skill set. It's such a different world, and it's fun for a change of pace to do that, to engage with a different audience and just a different style of writing in general, to be more whimsical and abstract and kind of engage that part of your brain and that part of the audience that's out there. So yeah, I would love to write more children's books, but I think it's a tough market. It just is. I mean, there are a lot of children's books in the world, and it's tough. I mean, not just to like find a publisher, but I think it's tough to say something that hasn't been said by somebody else who's absolutely brilliant already. I mean, there are so many poignant children's books out there that just cut to the core of some fundamental truth. It's like, man, with all that in there, where do I fit in? And it turns out there was a little pterodactyl niche there that wasn't quite filled. So I jumped on that spot. And now I need to find another gap like that.
Well, there's lots of creatures in the sea and who knows? And maybe in that fantasy sci-fi world that you're creating, maybe there's a beast there that you could bring over and introduce to the world.
I'll just write a series. In each book, it's a kid wanting to be a different dinosaur or a prehistoric fish or something else. And just do it over and over again and see if I can't milk that out of there. I mean, I look back at some other people who are kind of been in the children's sphere, like R.L. Stein. I looked him up on Wikipedia one day, 'cause I used to have a bunch of those Goosebump books. I think I had half a bookshelf of them. And I was like, surely that wasn't for real. Did that guy really write all of those? And I went and looked it up, and I'm pretty sure he did, that he was writing a book or two a month for years. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe it. I could not imagine that level of productivity. So I guess there just are some people out there in the children's space who just are phenomenal and make the rest of us look bad by comparison.
Well, I don't want to make you feel bad. We did have Jane Yolen on the podcast, who was wonderful, and she was on to celebrate, I believe it was her 420th traditionally published book.
Oh,
I'm not
sure.
Well,
that hurts. I'm not going to lie. That gets me right here. I've been struggling to do a book a year. I think I'm up to number 8 or number 9, depending on how you count them. So I'm only 411 short of her. So maybe if I stay up an extra hour every night, I can catch up. We'll see.
Well, we want everybody out there to give you some encouragement, because I think the world can use more pterodactyl books and more examples of families just supporting their kids in their dreams. Where can we go to find out more about you? You Can't Be a Pterodactyl, and the other great books that you've created.
So to find out about You Can't Be a Pterodactyl, that should be available anywhere books are sold at the end of July. It's coming up here. You can just type that into Google and find it at your retailer of choice. You can get signed copies through Main Street Books in Lafayette, Indiana. They are mailing those out nationwide to anybody who wants one and orders through them. For me personally, the best place to keep track of me is on Substack, jamesbreakwell.substack.com. And I write 2 newsletters a week there, just full of family antics and all that stuff. And then also, I'm probably best known for my Twitter account @ExplodingUnicorn. That's Exploding Unicorn without the E. Twitter is kind of a toss-up these days, but I am still there. I am still tweeting out family adventures, but Substack's probably the better way to go to keep up with me these days.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of You Can't Be a Pterodactyl. Our guest has been James Breakwell. Hey, James, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a delight.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Patrice Karst. She'll be here to celebrate the Invisible String Backpack. It's the latest in her Invisible String series. It's a fascinating conversation. It is truly heartfelt. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the podcast. Want to thank the folks who make today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, James Breakwell. Please be sure to check out You Can't Be a Pterodactyl. Also want to thank our sponsors, Dr. Ambrose Turner. Check out Rex's Journey. Also want to thank Since the Baby Came, a siblings learning to love story in 16 verses, written by Kathleen Long Bostrom. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dieris, Ann O'Leary, Monica Rivera Sosa, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.